Wow, looks like everybody was waiting on me. Give me a second, guys. We're just getting you all logged in here. Let's see. Four. All right. I think I got everybody locked in. Well, I hope the terrible weather today doesn't have you all down. It's about time, right? Ross, you especially have to be appreciating this. It's got to really suck playing baseball when it's like it has been.
Miserable. It's a complete different game. I can't feel my fingers. It's nuts.
I always wondered about musicians that like book outdoor gigs and like they're playing at night and it's like 45 degrees. I'm like, how do you make your fingers work? I just don't get it. Like I don't do cold well at all. Um, I would much rather be in 100-degree temperature than in 30 for sure. All right. But yeah, I thought about that when you sent me the email about your. I think it was you're at a game that was switched, right? It had been rescheduled.
Yeah, because one of the teams had COVID, so that we got off.
Yeah. And I just thought, and I think the same thing watching like the playoffs in October. Like, no, no, October, no, you don't play baseball in October. Not unless it's in front of a TV with a game controller. That's all. That's the only way I'm playing baseball in October. And I don't. My rule is for playing golf. I like to play golf, but my rule is if it's too cold to cut grass, it's too cold to play golf. And I've seen people, I go past a couple of golf courses every day. I've seen people literally out there playing in the snow, and I'm like, all right, I love the game, but come on. Is your life that bad that you have nothing better to do? That I don't know. I mean, I maybe I just don't love doing anything that much that I would put myself through that. But
How do you even find your ball in the snow?
well, you generally play with a colored one, like the fluorescent yellows and oranges and stuff like that. But I've done it. Don't get me wrong, but only under certain circumstances. I was at Lakeview Resort probably, oh man, it's been a long time ago now, but we were there in February having a convention and it got to 72 degrees one day, but it had been cold. It had snowed a couple of days before. And so the greens were actually still frozen, but it got up to 72 that day. So we thought, let's go play golf. Well, we did, but first of all, it was a bit of a mess out there because it had warmed up and everything was now muddy. You weren't allowed on the greens because they had been frozen. So you just like played to the green and then added a stroke or two for the putts and moved on. Yeah, so I mean, it was doable, but it certainly wasn't the same game that it normally is. So anyway, we got today. It looks like the next couple of days are not going to be so good. And then maybe back to getting a little bit more seasonal. So it looks like March is going to probably go out like a lion. It came in like a dysfunctional lamb, I think. And maybe it'll go out like a dysfunctional lion. I don't know, but we're going to have a little bit of everything here for a while. And the wind has been just phenomenal too. I heard something, and not to get sidetracked, but we already are. Might as well finish the thought, right? I heard something in the middle of the night last weekend that woke two of us up. Like at 3:30 in the morning, I heard there hadn't been it had been windy the day before, but there had been no wind overnight. And I heard something that sounded like it ripped. I have my patio roof is metal, and it sounded like it ripped a part of the patio roof off, and it flew over the house. Like I could hear the direction that it was going. And I heard it in the distance, like you hear how sound travels and how it gets faint I heard that for like 10 seconds. Got up, looked around. I still have not found any. I have no idea what that was. It must have been a UFO. That's the only thing I can think of. UFO flew over my house. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. All right. So let's take a look at the submissions for this week. Let me get on the right page here. And then our assignment for next week changes a little bit and hopefully gets a little more fun, a little less technical. So we have today and we have next week. Then the following week, I will not be here. I'll be in Atlanta. So there will be video instruction that week. I will send you a link to just watch the video. And it's probably going to be a couple of things sort of pieced together because I'm taking a video that I had done for a previous class and I'm probably going to add to it. So it might be a couple of different topics, but it won't be 3 hours long. So that'll be good. All right, so let me get into Bridge here. I'm going to share everything. There we go. And Carly, you are up first. So we're going to look at your original and let me put this down here, and your finished one. So first of all, yes, definitely is a high key subject. You've got, regardless of the fact that there are some dark tones in it. I didn't look at your histogram on this one. It was pretty obvious that you're definitely high key. Light clothing, a light background, the darkness, your hair and skin tone doesn't occupy enough of the image to drag that down. And I think this happened on both your high key and your low key images, though, we lost so much detail. It went, you went over. I like the tone, the color better. Definitely looks better there, but we definitely lost the tonality. It needed to be opened up a little bit, but probably not as much. And let me just open, because it is an NEF file, so I can open this in Camera Raw. And so it does need, well, first thing it needs is white balance, which is easy to do because we got a lot of white here. So I'm just going to click on the wall. If that doesn't work, we can try the sweater. I think the wall was a little better. And then we'll just raise the exposure a little bit. And I'm going to pull back on the highlights just a touch. So do you see in the upper right-hand corner here, the histogram that is associated with this? So watch what happens when I drag the exposure. It's a dynamic histogram. It actually changes with me doing this to the slider. So you really even your original image is pretty close to high key. Going a little bit is all it took to push that over the edge, but you could still go a little bit further without losing detail. So the point I'm trying to make is that high key is not about exposure. It's not about taking an image and raising or lowering its value. It's that an image with the proper exposure is predominantly lighter toned or darker toned. And this one definitely is. Even this histogram, which shows, and I don't know if we can change the, it's showing it in colors rather than luminosity. I don't know if we can change that in Camera Raw. They keep changing this. They just updated again the other day. Not sure. There we go. Workflow, raw defaults. No, it doesn't look like there's any way to do that. Lab color readouts. No, that's not what we want. Yeah, I can show the clipping indicators, but I can't change it to luminosity. It's still showing me the color values, but that's okay. I can still clearly tell that you've got a high key image here. But I would probably have stopped on the exposure about here. Let me open this. I'll save it as a JPEG, and we'll be able to compare the two together. All right. Carly 077. And I'll just put a 1 at the end of this so we can keep the same file name. All right, so close that up. And of course it updated I really didn't have to save it because it updated the raw file as well. But there's,
Yeah, I see the difference.
yeah, it's that huge area of, that we lost all the detail in the top that you're wearing there. I also think you may have gone a little bit, and this might be a function of the overexposure, a little bit far. I think I actually like your skin tone better in yours than I do in mine, but I think yours is a little too far, mine's not far enough. And it was just because I clicked on, something that was supposed to be white. I could have adjusted it from there, but I think yours is probably a little more natural, if not, even though it's a little bit over, but it's that exposure that really, you just want to watch that, but you do have a high key image, no doubt about it.
I do have to say that picture was out of frustration because me and the cameras do not get along. And I had set the timer a little bit earlier than I usually set the timer on my phone, and it went off and I was like, oh shit. So it was one of not the fun moments because I was like, I am frustrated because my eyes are not staying open. I hate it.
I kind of wondered if there was a story behind, because it does kind of look.
It was out of frustration and last second realization that the camera was going off.
Well, like I said, the good news is that you clearly understood the subject matter that you needed for this, regardless of the technical issues. On the low key side, I'm going to say the same thing. I think I kind of like your original better than the processed one. And it's an exposure thing again, where we've kind of lost detail, not only in the highlights of that bottle, but in the shadow areas as well. So I'm going to open your NEF file of that. I think we can just open the shadows on this one a little bit and still probably pull the exposure a little. No, not like that. I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, it took a while for the shadow slider to update. Yeah, I don't want to go too far because there's some noise there. Yeah, I think your original exposure, because of how it's lit, we don't have any edge lighting. I don't think we're going to get a lot of detail out of the sides, but I still think it was better there than on that one, because that we just, kind of lost it all as far as detail is concerned. But again, the subject matter definitely was correct. And the fact that you have some bright areas in this file it's not going to counteract the fact that the majority of your image is dark. So it's a low key image. And even at these, let me put the two originals up side by side. You can kind of see, even though there's frustration in the one on the right, it still has more of a light, airy feel. It still has, the one on the left, the bottle it's just a moodier image. And that's just a function of, of the key of the image. So yeah, it worked. You had some technical issues on the processing side, but it definitely worked. You definitely have what you wanted. Between the two, I think this image probably, yeah, I think technically and in all other ways, this is probably your better image, just simply because it is one of the, you know, more strictly high key photos that I got at all. Like a lot of you submitted images that can be considered high key. The histogram, you know, definitely bears it out, but they don't really scream high key when you look at it. This one does. This, I look at it and I know instantly, you know, pretty much what I've got. So you did a good job on that. All right, let's move on to Hannah. Oh, Hannah, well, you missed one here. So, and somebody else can tell you this because I think, who was it? Sierra. Sierra has this as her low key image, and Hannah has that as her high key image. And I think that actually both of these are probably a little off. I'm going to open up and look. So there's our image in Photoshop. I'm going to change my histogram over here to luminosity and refresh. And you can definitely see, actually, let me I'll pull that panel up into the screen so we can see it better. You can definitely see that the vast majority of the pixels in this image are on the low key side. Now, had you cropped this in to just the flower, I'm pretty sure, let's see what happens. If I had done that, now it starts to spread that histogram. I still think it's probably a little too much low key, but it's definitely starting to spread it. Let's do that. And now you can see even more, but it still kind of leaves me with more of a mid key feeling than high key. You do have a spike in the high key, but you have probably more pixels still on the darker side than we do on the lighter side. Let me go back to your original. There we go. See, I think if you're there, because I'm not sure if we tend to lose you a lot, I know.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I think that you saw the subject of the photo as this flower, thinking, well, that's a lighter toned image or a lighter toned, you know, flower, so it's got to be high key. But the problem is it occupies so little space in the overall image that all the darker pixels are kind of shadowing it. Now, this would have been a pretty good low key image. And actually stating that, yes, we can have brighter pixels in an image, but overall still be kind of low key. And that's what we have here. Let me close that up. And in this one, let's take a look. So this is your low key image, and there is a spike down here, no doubt about it, because the lower half of your image is all, you know, definitely much darker than anything else. The sky, so this area here, this little hump, that's represented by the sky. This spike at the end is probably mostly the sun that's in the middle here, and then the little highlights on the water and so forth. Let me get that cropping mark off of there. So again, I think had you cropped it, you know, just above the horizon line, then you definitely, or I'm sorry, just below. Let's try that. Let's just go in and crop this, because I have not done it. I don't want that ratio. There we go. So even if I keep all the way across and a little bit of the horizon, yeah, that definitely changes the histogram and shifts it off to the right. But as it was, it's about 50-50. It's, you know, it's hard. You can't go in and actually count and have it show you how many pixels are here and how many pixels are there. But this one's pretty much a mix. I'd almost have to call this a mid key. So I think you had the right idea as far as what you were looking at in the photo. You know, you were looking at the sky and the sun, and then the other one you were looking at the flower, but failed to realize that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, if you look at the overall photo, there are there are way more pixels on the other side of the fence than what you were probably looking for. Let me close this. Photographically, I think we're pretty much on equal footing here. I think maybe your landscape shot maybe is a little more, I think I like the fact that the sun is in the image and it's, really, really bright sun, but you still have detail throughout some of the foreground. I think your exposure on this is pretty accurate. I think if you had gone brighter to get more detail in the foreground, you would have blown that sky entirely out. And if you had gone any darker to get more detail in the sky, then you would have had pretty much a silhouette. So I think this is probably a little bit better. The flower one, I like it, but I don't know. There's something about flower images that are shot with a flash or with a hard light source, like in darkness, that when they create these shadows, and this is just a personal thing. Don't read anything into it. I'm not saying that it's wrong. Definitely not. Just for me, I think I enjoy flower photos more when they're under, for the most part, natural light, or if they are augmented in some way with, reflectors or lights that it's not as obvious. So I think for that reason, I kind of lean towards your, and I always like sparkles on the water. I don't know. I just, when I'm doing portrait stuff down by the river, and we have this kind of situation, I'll use those sparkles as a background quite a bit. It's just something I like to see in a picture. All right, let's go to Jaden. All right, so Jaden, I'm going to start with your low-key image first. Kind of enjoyed this. I wish you had titled this. I think this image could have a really cool, really fun title. And again, sometimes you guys get ahead of me because the assignment that's going to come up next week, you might have been able to play with this a little bit and make it work for that. And so the reason I looked at that one first is because this one, I think I love this, and it definitely is high key as much as that one's low key, but I wish that this had been an egg, because then we would have had to ask the question. You know what question, right? Which came first? So yeah, but for what you did, definitely work. What was your in the shot of the peanut or whatever that? What is? It's not a peanut. What is that?
Pistachio.
Pistachio. Okay. So what was your light source here? What'd you use for a light source?
That's good old fashioned sunlight.
Oh, okay. So I think it really works on this. Like, this is such a stark image, like I love the negative space. I love the rule of thirds composition. I love the strong shadow coming off of that pistachio, and the fact that it's such a small thing, yet you've got it, as sharply focused as you possibly could. There's no way on something that small to get it all the way across generally, or from front to back, but there's some serious sharpness on the front edge of that. Like, you definitely nailed that. So this, again, when the image is a little simpler, there's less to complain about, and so you just throw a couple simple things and follow a couple simple rules, and bang, you got it. With that being said, I like this one too. Like, I think the only thing, and I'm gonna say I like your pistachio a little bit better, just simply because, as someone who's spent 40 years doing portraits, even a pet portrait, I want to see their eyes. And again, so I'm not knocking the fact that I mean, I see it, but it's just not, it's not lit as much as I'd like it to be. But I do love the texture that is created across that bird from, what's a relatively soft light source, but still it's creating some texture in the feathers. And I like that. I like the fact that it's clearly a low key image. I think both of these you probably nailed as far as the concept is concerned. I'm on the fence. I think I like your pistachio a little bit better just because it's simple, but if you disagree, we'll go with the what came first.
Oh man. I guess we'll go with pistachio.
So this is weird because you guys always will have more of an emotional attachment to the images than I will, because you were there when they were created. You know the backstory, you know everything about it, which I don't. So I'm going on the image only, and I can live with either one. I think I see fewer things in the pistachio for me to critique or complain about than I do in the chicken and a rooster. I don't know. I'm not a farm kid. It is some type of fowl. But I think if that eye was a little, a little more detail in the eye, I think I would really fall in love with that one. But I definitely like your pistachio. I think you nailed that one. All right, let's go to Caleb. So Caleb, you went a little step further. You gave me the image and you gave me a screenshot of the histogram to basically say, there you go. This is a guaranteed low key image, and it definitely is. So I don't know, is that the dam that I'm seeing there in the left? Oh, I know Caleb was there. I can't see if he's still there. Well, I see.
He's still in here. I just don't see him.
Yeah, I see the space. There he is. He was having technical difficulties.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
That's Stratton Dam.
Stratton Dam. Where is Stratton Dam?
You know where Pike Island Dam is?
Yeah.
The opposite direction.
Oh, okay. So you're saying south rather than north then?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
the next dam.
Gotcha. I didn't know what it was called. So this is a really cool image. Like, it's a really interesting sunset. I'm guessing it's sunset rather than sunrise, but that's let me pull this down here. That's really unusual. It's a really unusual sky. It does look like a UFO. That must have been what flew over my house. That's what we're going to go with. And normally I would love to see a little more detail throughout the middle part of that, but boy, it wouldn't take much. Like, I love being able to just see the edge of the dam. And I think maybe just getting a little more in that, and you might have been able to, from your original file, I don't know. But I kind of like just seeing that little, thing jutting in and creating a little bit of, a little more mystery over on that side. But man, what a cool sky and what a great reflection. This is a very symmetrical image, even though we've got the dam on the left and not on the right. Pretty cool. Pretty, and a good, low key image for sure. Then this is our high key image.
I kind of played with this a lot.
Yeah, I think probably you went a little over on the exposure. When you start to get that blue cast in the shadows, like you've got at the bottom of the image, and then we are losing a little bit of detail up in the cloud areas. It is high key. I mean, I didn't open it, but I'm pretty sure if I do, and I don't know, this histogram used to be, you could set it and it would stay, and now it does not. But yeah, clearly, the pixels are shifted to the right. So you would have, even though there is a hump down here below the midtone, the majority are still off to the right. So clearly it's a high key image. Maybe not what I would consider traditional high key, but certainly fits the bill. But this one, I think, by far is the more interesting image. And I would say if the original of this, please don't tell me it's a cell phone shot. Is it, or is it? Because if this had been taken on, a camera with raw file capabilities, man, you could have pulled some detail out of there to really make this thing even more. Your sky and your reflection are great. I would just love to see a little more in that center area. Not a ton, just a little bit, but overall, it's a pretty cool shot. Right place, right time. And your other one, this looks like it's, is it coming south on 22? Is that where this is? Up near Steubenville, Wintersville?
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually when I drive past there, it's very late at night, so I see the signs, but I don't see much else. Yeah, that one's cool. That's a really good image. That's I think the unusualness of it is what really strikes me. So good
It was,
job there.
stormy that night.
Yeah, that must have been it. I mean, because you normally don't see a saucer shaped light pattern like this. It's usually more uniform across, but when there's a storm or has been a storm, you get some pretty unusual cloud patterns and some pretty unusual lighting patterns. So this couldn't have been more than what, a minute or two after the sun crested the horizon, right? Yeah. So there's a very narrow window before, during, and after sunrise and sunset. And if you had, and I don't know, maybe you did, but if you had stood there and taken 30 pictures, 10 right before it dropped, 10, as it's dropping, and 10 after it drops, you would have had 30 completely different looking pictures because it changes so fast. I think the last time I did something like that, and I was shooting film, so we really had to back it up. I think I shot an image every 30 seconds for about 15 minutes. Because there was just no way to predict, how it was going to record on film at any given time. But yeah, pretty neat shot. Did I put it in? I think I did. Yes, I did. 1, 2, what do we get in here? We have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's correct. All right, we're moving on to Brooke. So Brooke, your low key image, when I first saw it, I thought, not sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I pulled the histogram up and I think it definitely qualifies. Again, when you look at the histogram, if you're in Photoshop and you want to look at the histogram, the colors is going to give you, if it's in color mode, this drop down, it'll give you a pretty, still pretty accurate rendition. But I always want to see it either in RGB or in luminosity, which, as you can see, are pretty much the same. And then, and I can't make this window any bigger, so I apologize. Then whenever you see the little warning symbol here, this little exclamation point and a triangle, that means that you're only looking at a histogram that is, it's not totally accurate. It needs to be re-rendered. And that's what the little double arrowed circle here is for. When I click that, the arrow goes away and the histogram will smooth out a little bit. So now I know I'm looking at a more accurate histogram. And definitely, if you draw a line up from the center of that, definitely the vast majority of pixels are below that to the left side. So even though the sweater, the pole, the face, all of that, there's a good bit of surface area in this print that is mid-tone. But still overall, there's a lot of darkness there. And even within those areas, there's some dark areas. So that's definitely low key. Your high key image, I think, is more fun and more interesting. I think the exposure could go up just a little bit. Let me do that. Yeah, we'll pull the highlights and the midtones back a little bit. That does raise the value of your histogram, but it was still high key even without doing that. It's definitely, there's the midpoint right about here, and the vast majority are off to the right. So the little dude, I don't recognize. Is that, a character from something?
You remember the movie Big Hero 6? The robot guy?
Well, I know I didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, it's the little robot guy in the movie.
Gotcha. They make good characters. When I first saw it, I thought of Wall-E. Was that the Disney movie? Yeah, Wall-E. And then I've seen other characters. In fact, boy, if you go back, there was a really cool, well, I thought it was cool at the time. Maybe if I saw it again now, I would think it was terrible. but there's an old movie with the guy named Bruce Dern starred in it called Silent Running. It's a science fiction movie, and he's alone on this spaceship, and the only other things that have any life to them, if you want to call it that, on the spaceship are these three little robots, I guess. And their function is to keep the ship running. That they clean, they fix things that go wrong, and so forth. They don't quite look like this, but they're not too far off. And there were three of them, and he names them Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And the whole movie, it's just him and these robots. There's nobody else in it. And it's basically about him trying to maintain his sanity, out in deep space, for long periods of time. And it's sort of like, if any of you saw, oh shoot, the title, drawing a blank here. I can't even. Tom Hanks, Castaway. That's it. Anybody see Castaway? And how he related to. Boy, I'm really messing it up today with names. What did he name his volleyball?
Wilson.
Wilson. Jeez, yeah. How could I forget that? It was a Wilson volleyball. Yeah. So kind of along the same lines, I think we've had this sort of relationship with these characters throughout, all of cinema. So I didn't see this movie, but it is a cool looking character. And it's definitely high key. So so it looks like you actually placed these items together. Were you just looking for light or white items and the white background? Is that how that worked out?
Sort of. I had them all together anyways, and I was just like, oh, these are perfect. So
Gotcha. Okay. So they pretty much like that all the time.
yeah.
I like the fact that we've got some, probably it looks like maybe later afternoon daylight filtering through those blinds, and it's a really cool ice blue color, which, adds a little bit of pop to this, because it is pretty much the only dominant color in there. So that was pretty cool. I like that. Let me close this up. Try to close this up. Not sure why it wouldn't, but it did now. So nothing against this picture or this person, but I like that one better. It's cuter.
Yeah.
All right, Ross, let's see what Ross did. Okay, so pretty much one of the comments that I've made already about a couple of images applies to this. So there's some positives and negatives. The negative is, I'll start with those, is the exposure. It's a little underexposed. And again, I think maybe some of you might have been thinking that that would help you to achieve the low key look, but I don't think you needed it. Like if I'm going to go in and raise the level on this a little bit. Yeah, if you look, there's almost no pixels north of midtone, so we can pull that back a good bit. And then when we look at the histogram and redraw it, it's still a low key image. I mean, we still have almost everything to the left side of center there. So even at that, I think the black in the number takes up such a large amount of space, and then the gray of the jersey is dark enough that we definitely get a low key feel. The positives, I like how you again simplified, took a very common normal subject, simplified it, made it interesting, probably because, as much as anything, because of the angle that you shot it at. You could have shot this straight on and it would have, been the same thing as far as the histogram is concerned, but it's a little more interesting laid down like this. So it was a good choice of subject for, what you were looking for. This one I think is even cooler. This is a great little texture image. Like this would be a file that I would hang on to and apply as a texture overlay to files. And, we're not going to get into that this class or this semester, but this would be a file that would be really fun for that. Normally, I would look at an image and say, well, okay, what's the subject? Where's your subject? What's the story? But there are some images that are, like we've looked at, abstracts or very minimalistic, that can still work. You don't necessarily have to have a subject. It's not like we're going to pick out one of these water drops and go, well, there's our subject. It's just an overall image. Again, I think the exposure could have been raised a little bit on this, but it's still, even with it where it is, it's still a high key image. Let's look at that. Yeah, right there's the midpoint, and almost everything is it's barely to the right, but it is to the right. So I think that's good. I think that's for me, that's it's strange that it's nothing more than water drops, but I find that to be a very interesting image. Is that like is it a window or a hood of a car, or what is that exactly?
No, it's just on a window.
Window.
It was when it was like really, I don't know, it was raining. I think it was Sunday. Is that when it like really came down?
Oh, I've lost track.
It was either Saturday or Sunday, and I saw that and I snapped a picture of it.
It might have been Sunday, because I think Saturday, well, both days I did this, but on Saturday I was moving a lot of equipment out of my studio, getting the last of it out, and I don't think we got rained on, so it must have been Sunday. But yeah, it's kind of cool, this, and I don't know, maybe I'll show you real quickly if I can, let me find an image here. Actually, let's take one of the ones we've looked at already. We'll take the pistachio here. And I'm going to see if I can create a texture out of your image. And so all I'm going to do is drag this image on top of the pistachio image. Now, when I do, it's not going to match, the size and resolution isn't going to be the same. So I'm going to have to adjust for that. And I'm just going to transform your image to a larger size. And again, my keyboard's not acting the way it's supposed to. So let me just do it the long way. So I'm just going to make it, fit basically. And then all I'm going to do is change the blending mode. Actually, let's go through and we'll look at all of the, I'll just cycle through these and you can see the different effect. There's a kind of a cool one where the darker pixels from the other image are showing, or from that image are showing through. Each one is going to give a very different look and a different effect. Those were all pretty interesting. Hard lights, okay. That one's kind of funky. Get into some of the reversals, and they're kind of cool. But I think the best ones were up here, like that one. So that's basically, one of the ways you would use a texture overlay. And then sometimes we would actually just blur that out a little bit, so that's not quite as recognizable for what it is. And it just adds a little tooth. It adds a little, something to the image. We do that a lot, not necessarily combining those two types of images, but a lot of the concept work that I do involves blending a lot of images together. So I think that would have worked. All right, where were we? That was Ross. And so what do you like, Ross? Do you like your raindrops or the jersey?
I like the rain one.
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't think we put it in there yet. Nope. Like I said, it was just both of these were a good recognition of what it is that you were looking for, the making a high key and a low key image out of these. So that works. All right, Samantha. So Samantha, I'm going to skip around here a little bit at some of your images, because you've got, let's look at these first, these three. And I have to keep moving this around. There we go, so that we can see them. So again, like I said before, key is not a function of exposure. You want to look at an image with its correct exposure and then determine what key it is, rather than take an image and try to make it low key and high key by just changing the exposure. With that being said, what is it that we have in this image? Let's see. We'll open it up and take a look. So you do have a large spike just into the highlight areas, but I still think we're close. We're about 50-50 here. We've still got almost as many pixels to the dark side as we do the light one. So I think that probably that image is really qualifies more as a mid key rather than high key or low key. So this is a low key image and this is the original. So you did bring the exposure up a little bit. Let's see what happens if we bring it up to where it probably should be. I think even at that, and we'll pull these highlights back. Yeah, even at that, if you look at the histogram up there, it's clearly still low key. You know, you may have been wanting to create a little more mood by keeping it down, you know, underexposed like that, and that's fine, or not letting the highlights blow out. But either way, that would have stayed a low key image no matter what you did there. This one, I think I like so better than all of the others. So there's your original. And again, you really didn't probably have to go quite as far on the exposure, although this one's not overdone. We haven't lost a ton of detail. There's maybe a little bit there that we could have saved. But overall, and let me just open it up and take a look. So it's definitely, right now, the histogram kind of shows it as a low-key image. But if we bring this up, yeah, I think the exposure is probably a little better there. But even back a little bit like that, we still, on the histogram, still probably have the majority of pixels to the right-hand side of the midpoint. So yeah, definitely high key. Now let's talk about the image itself. Really cute idea. Great painting, by the way. I don't know if is that something that you just bought because you liked? Do you know who painted it or anything about it at
Yeah,
all?
my mom gave it to me for my birthday because one of my favorite animals, as you could probably all tell, is elephants. So, but I just love it because it's simple, but it's also so, you know, colorful. And then I had this idea of like him, you know, looking up to, because he's a small one and that's a huge one,
So
and the white background. But
yeah, you got all of that right. No doubt about it. This is funny because in 2 weeks, let's see, next week. No, actually next week, I think. I'm trying to remember how this plays out on the schedule. We're going to have a topic that this would have been a perfect shot for. But, you know, obviously you won't be able to use it again for that, but I think you definitely will get the idea. I think we'll talk about it next week. And then the assignment won't be due for 2 weeks because of the fact that I won't be here the week after. But this would have worked perfectly for that. I like the play between the two. It's almost like, you know, hey, this is my dad, or this is what I want to be when I grow up, or some, you know, again, you can make whatever story up it is that you want and make it work. But yeah, I love the painting. If you want to see some, let me cancel out of this. If you want to see some amazing images from Africa, and a lot of elephants are in there, actual photographs that will look just like this, go on Facebook and look for a guy named Kevin Dooley, Dooley. There are two friends of mine who do this. They lead safaris in Africa all the time and photograph these things. I can't remember the other one's name right off the top of my head, but they both do some phenomenal work like this. And I do particularly remember some elephant shots that I was just like, wow, that's amazing. This is kind of what it looks like his work actually. So I think you'll like that if you check it out. But I like your, I'm going to use your original. I think I do like the fact that you cropped out some unwanted detail. Maybe we will use this one then because of that. I just think the exposure you took maybe a little too far. But I think you were trying to get it to make sure you had a high key image when really
Yeah, I was trying too hard because I was confused. I mean, like when we look at the photos that you showed in class,
Mhm.
those are obvious, but I don't have a studio, so I'm like, that's why I have that white towel and making all this white stuff.
No, and
then-
that's what you really want to do. You want the objects in your image, and like I said, I've said this a couple times. You want the objects in your image that when they are recorded normally or naturally, that those tones will just automatically fall into that. But yeah, I noticed that a number of you did this. You increased the exposure just to kind of make sure you got there. But in the long run, it's not the best exposure for the image. And you still would have had a high key image, I think, even if you hadn't gone quite this far. And like I said, a couple of you did that. So that's those are things that I can't foresee. Once I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have seen that coming. But I didn't. But yeah, still, it's a good high key image, and like I said, overall, it's a good concept. All right, Savannah. So we have our low key. Probably not even going to have to check that one. I think a lot of dark pixels, and then most of your sky is definitely mid-tone and below. So there's probably not enough light pixels in the sun and the reflection, and even in the highlights and the clouds to mess up the fact that that is definitely a low-key image. So this is the only time I'm not a fan of any kind of artificial sun flare in an image, but when you get it naturally, sometimes when you get it naturally, I'm like, oh, get that out of there, take that out of there. But I do like the, the diagonal effect that was created. Probably, what did you shoot this with? Let me see if it says in here.
It was on my phone.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to guess, because what happens to the lenses on phones is they get either the plastic or the glass in front of the lens either gets scratched or smudged. And this is what light sources will do when that's present. It'll create a streak or a flare or something like that in a direction. So unless you had a bad lens or a dirty lens on a normal camera, you probably would not have had that streak off of the sun. But it's still a pretty interesting shot. Again, your exposure on it is pretty much, I think, where it needs to be. Any lighter, we would have lost detail in the sky and way more in the sun. Any darker, we would have gone way too much to lost even more detail in the river or the creek or whatever that is at the bottom. So I think your exposure is right on. So these two for your high key, the black and white, and I'm surprised that a lot of you didn't go to black and white on these, but this one definitely is high key. I think the other one is more mid key. Let's take a look. Yeah, this one was spread out fairly evenly. I mean, is there? I don't know that there are more on the light side. I definitely has a spike there to the right of the midpoint, but I think the pixels are pretty well spread out evenly. Again, this is what we call a normal brightness value subject, so that your camera's meter on this should nail the exposure every time, because there's nothing overly light or overly dark that should affect that. This one, it looks like you went in and took the background out. Is that what you did?
Well, actually, on the portrait mode on the iPhone, there's
Oh, yeah.
like one of it's like that. So there's like a stage light one, and then
Mhm.
there's this one. The stage light makes the entire background black, and then this one made it white. So I tried that because my resources are very limited because I literally just got released from the health department for having COVID. So
Oh.
I haven't been able to come out of my room or anything.
How did that go? I mean, was it bad? Did you have a lot of symptoms?
Um, it it was kind of like the flu for the first couple days. Like I had really bad body aches, a high fever, but it cleared up after a couple days and I felt a lot better.
Well, that's good. I had those symptoms for 16 hours after my second shot, but luckily that went away pretty quickly. And those that have actually had it, um, I think you're lucky that you're as young as you are. I think a lot of people that are your age that are getting it are having a little bit of an easier time. It's still no fun, but yeah, it can really be pretty devastating when you start to get a little bit older. I'm glad you're okay. And I knew there have been a couple of I've gotten emails from the college saying, this particular person or that person can't do in-seat classes right now. So I knew that was what was behind it. I think for that reason, I'm starting to second guess and rethink my process about doing face-to-face. We're going to still keep my finger on it, and hopefully maybe even if we just did one class, that'd be great. But um, if there's any threat there at all, I just don't want to put anybody at risk. So if we have to do this virtually the rest of the semester, we will. All right. So yeah, now that you mentioned that, I kind of recognize that mode on the camera. It doesn't always do a great job. It sort of does look like a bad Photoshop job sometimes with what it leaves as opposed to what it takes. But it definitely gave you the high key effect that you were looking for here. So that definitely worked. Let's pull this back. Both of these are really cute, but I don't know that that is, strictly speaking, high key. And I think it's a better image than this one of this little girl. I'm guessing this is like what, a niece or cousin or something?
That's my sister.
Your sister? Okay. Yeah. So I think that one's really cute. But again, it's not strictly a high key. This one is, but it's not as, I mean, she's got a little more of a smile there, which is kind of nice, and I like the hands coming in. There's a couple things I do like about it, but overall, I think just photographically speaking, this shot, it has a little better composition, and the exposure is pretty cool on it. Not a lot I would change. I think I probably would have gone in if you had the ability and taken that little flare thing out. But other than that, it's not a big deal. It's still an impactful shot. I think when I first saw it, I was like, wow, that's cool. So you always want that first impact to be, a little strong and a little more positive. And I think of your three images, that was the one that had more impact for me. And I know this one probably does for you, or that one, because it's a little more special. Like I said, you have emotional attachments to images that a viewer will not. And a viewer is going to go with just what they have in front of them and not the background stories. All right, let's do Sierra's next. High key, definitely. There is going to be some midtone here. Let's look at the histogram. But if you draw a line up the center, are there more pixels to the right than to the left? Yeah, definitely. Again, exposure on this one is pretty dead on. I do see a couple little areas that maybe I would like to have backed off a touch, but overall, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good exposure. So no problem there. This one says, I think this counts as low key. And it does. This one is going to have an interesting histogram though. So check this out. Where did our histogram go? Oh, did we close it up accidentally? Yeah, there it is. I would have expected even more separation between those two spikes, but it's cool to look at this and recognize what it is that we're seeing. So this little bump here, the one on the left, what is that? What do you think that is in the image?
Would that be the fence?
Yep, that's the chain link, no doubt. And then the bigger spike is the orange track in the background. The fact that we have some pixels coming up more towards the highlight, well, those are the lines that are in there. But yeah, that's good call. That's definitely what that is. And I think it's an interesting image too, because again, now we have these diamond shapes and triangles and diagonals played against the diagonals going in the background. So very simple image, but still kind of powerful. So I like that one. Now we definitely have a low key flower here. This one, even though the lighting is still harsh because it's sunlight and it's casting that sharp edge shadow, we have a little more ambient light, you know, throughout the image. And I like that. Love the composition. Definitely nailed the exposure. Let me look at your last one here. Well, definitely these three looks like you, again, you're a few weeks ahead because we're going to be talking about using color as an image, or I'm sorry, as a subject. So two of these three images, if not all three, would have been good candidates for that. But now you know you can do it, so you will. So that's our low key flower. And this one says, this do be a key. Yeah, it is. It's we have high key, low key, mid key, and now door key. I didn't know there was a fourth key, but there apparently is. And again, where you put this has dictated what it is actually. So it is a little bit more high key. It's primarily a mid key image overall, but there is a little bit of a shift to the right. So I'd have to qualify that as high key. Good, again, good composition on all of these. Great exposure on all of them. It's hard to pick. I think, I mean, I like your key just because I think it's hilarious, but I can live with any of these four, whatever you like. I like all four of them.
I don't know, maybe the flower.
Yeah, I can't argue it. I mean, it's very, if you want that flower to be your subject, you can't not see it. So that's a picture well done when that happens. I just think that you have, you know, all of your images really kind of look pretty good along those lines. So, but yeah, if I just sit back and look, that one probably does have more overall impact than the other ones. I like the storytelling in the first one, and I like the story in the last one. I like the simplicity in the second one, but I think you're right. Let's go with that one. All right, Zach. So instead of high key, low key, Zach went with black picture and white picture.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So this is a CR2, but even when we open this up, I don't know that we're gonna, actually, I've already done it. I've already pulled up the exposure on it a little bit. Probably should have done that. Let me reset it. I think this is a little closer to how it came in. And I went in and pulled the exposure up, not a ton, but I just wanted to see a little more detail in there than what we had. So again, not necessarily a function of exposure, and this is an underexposed image, so naturally it is going to be a low-key image, but I think even if this is exposed a little brighter, I still think you've got a low-key image. So
Okay.
I think it works for that, no doubt about it. And you're shooting into a mirror, correct?
Yeah.
So it might have been interesting. Actually, let's do this. Let me open this in Photoshop. So if you flip it if you go to image rotation and say flip canvas horizontal, it writes it up. So originally, you know, the words were backwards, which is how I knew it was shot into a mirror. And if you flip it, now you're like, wait a minute, how did you get this picture? You think there's somebody else with another camera that actually took the picture. So just one of those little things to make people go, make them wonder a little bit. And all it involves is just flipping it in Photoshop to get that. So anytime you shoot something in a mirror, keep that in mind, because it definitely works. It works on a lot of images. You have to be careful if it's not a mirror and there are words in there and you think, wow, this would look better flipped. But if there's a street sign or something and you're going to flip it the wrong way. Now you can, if you want to spend a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, but more time, you can flip an image and then reflip back just a part of it so that the signs are correct. You just have to make a selection and flip that around. Sometimes takes a little bit more work, but yeah, when I saw this, I'm like, oh, that's a mirror shot.
Yeah.
Now, what is this exactly, subject-wise?
It's just this little clear quartz pendant that someone gave me, and I put it on top of my phone's flashlight.
Okay, so that's what my second question is, how did you light it?
Yeah.
Because it definitely transmits a lot of light. Now, surprisingly, you would think this is clearly high key, right? But when you look at the histogram, it's really, it is. I mean, it definitely qualifies. If I draw a line up there, I think we have just a few more pixels on the right than we do on the left, but there's way more on the left than I would have anticipated. I think there's some mid key in the background. But it does surprise me that foreground, because it does occupy a large amount of space in your image.
Mhm.
And I like the diagonal that you gave it too, by the way. It kind of reminds me of Superman's Fortress of Solitude. You know, he had these crystals that he put down in and got different things to happen there. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Maybe it wasn't in all Superman movies, but the ones that had the Fortress of Solitude were pretty interesting. I think the old Christopher Reeves, is that his name? Christopher Reeves? Yeah. He was not the old Superman. He wasn't the new Superman. He was the middle Superman. He was the one he did several Superman movies, and then was in an accident riding a horse. He got knocked off a horse and was paralyzed the rest of his life. Couldn't move anything from his neck down. Still was probably one of the most positive minded people you'd ever want to see for somebody with that kind of an affliction, and somebody who'd been Superman. I mean, my God, come on, like coolest thing. But yeah, it was sad. He died, I think, a few years ago. He still wasn't really that old, but he had deteriorated because of that. But I remember again, we get off track when we talk about these things, but it's kind of funny. There were some good movies, like those were some interesting movies. The newer ones, I think, had way better special effects, but I think way worse stories. His genre, there was a lot of humor in them. These were the ones that had, what's his name, played Lex Luthor, Gene Hackman. So a lot of good actors. I think Margot Kidder was in some of those. So they had really good cast and really cool stories. They were campy. They were a little, funny just because they were quirky, but that's kind of how the Superman comics always were. But I remember one of the last movies that he did, he had given up his powers. So anybody a Superman fan at all? So I'm like, if I'm going to be a superhero, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be Superman. Come on, the guy can do it all. He can fly. He's strong. He can see through things. I mean, you know, he has that X-ray eye thing where he can burn stuff. I mean, he's got it all. He's indestructible. Unless you've got kryptonite, you cannot hurt the guy. So why would I want to be Batman? You know, Batman's got some cool gadgets. Wow. Shoot Batman, he dies. Okay. You shoot Superman, he laughs at you. So I'm going to be Superman. So he gives up his powers because, and I don't remember now why he had to do that. He had to make a decision to save somebody, and that was the only way.
Yeah, probably a girl or something.
It was probably Lois Lane, yeah. So he loses his powers, and it's like at the beginning of the movie, and he's in this truck stop for some reason. Now he's just Clark Kent, right? And he's getting picked on by these big truckers, like these guys in flannel shirts and stuff. And they literally beat the crap out of him and throw him out the door. And so the movie goes on. Of course, you know what happens. He regains his powers. And the very last scene of the movie, he's back in that diner, roadside diner again. And these two guys, same guys, come up to him. And they're like, hey, I thought we told you never to come back here. And of course, a fight ensues. And he does some pretty phenomenal things, you know, because now he's Superman again and throws them out the door. And everybody's just looking at him like, are you the same guy? And he goes, oh, I've been working out. Like that's what did. I've been working out a little bit. So anyway, off topic completely, but yeah, Superman. Anybody got a favorite superhero that you would be besides Superman or Supergirl?
I like Daredevil.
All right, hang on, Max first. You Daredevil?
Yeah, he's a vigilante, but
well, I don't mind that. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Scarlet Witch, man. Scarlet Witch.
I don't know that. Who is that?
Scarlet Witch?
Scarlet
She's,
Witch.
In Marvel.
I am not familiar with Scarlet Witch. I will have to check that out. I have to look her up. Huh.
Wanda Maximoff.
What was that?
Wanda. That's her actual name. Is
Oh, Wanda. Okay. All right. I have to look that up. I'm not familiar with it. Zach, you had one, didn't you?
Oh, just the guy that teleports. I forget his name, but he's also in Marvel.
So interesting that you bring that up. So when I go to Atlanta in April, our April board meeting it starts out with team building exercises, which, you know, sound kind of lame, but they're actually pretty interesting. And I remember one of the icebreakers that we did a couple of years ago, the last time we met face to face, was that very thing. Everybody had to write down, if you could have one superpower, just one, what would it be? Now think about what some of them are: super strength, ability to fly, teleportation, travel in time, read minds. And as you start thinking about it, it's like, I mean, it's tough. Like, how do you pick? I think there were some good reasons for why certain people picked certain ones. The ability to travel back in time was an interesting one because, you know, if you wanted to be rich, you just go back and put a big bet on the Super Bowl or something like that, right? So that one's kind of you know, it's not just the ability to move back and forth through time, but it's what you can do with it. And I think that was the interesting part, was listening to what people thought they would do with it. There's a TV series, and we're going to take a break here in a second, but we'll finish with, there's a TV series on Netflix, and if anybody's seen it, let me know. I'm in the middle of watching it now. It's called Outlander. Anybody seen that? Really, really cool. So let me give you the premise of it. English woman in the 1940s, post World War II. Her husband is very much into genealogy, and he's been tracing his ancestry back to the revolution, or prior to the Revolutionary War, even, and in England and Scotland. And they take a trip, and they're looking, he's showing her, all the places where his ancestors lived and where these famous battles were between the Scottish and the British. and they eventually find this little spot that sort of looks like a miniature Stonehenge. And it's a place that's, it's in Scotland, and it's revered sort of by the locals as, being a very mystical place and having strange powers and all of that, and which it does. And she actually eventually ends up, when she's there, she hears this noise. It's sort of a buzzing noise, and she's drawn to one of the bigger stones. And when she touches the stone, instantly she's alone. Her husband is gone, and everything looks a little bit different. And long story short, she is now 200 years in the past, and she's living in a time where the ancestors that he was telling her about existed. And of course, she can't really tell anybody. They capture her. They think she's an English spy and everything else. She can't really tell anybody who she really is and what she's doing there. So it's kind of an interesting play that way. But when it really gets interesting is that she spends 3 years there. It's 3 years before she goes back through the stones. She falls in love with a guy and marries him because she doesn't know that she'll ever be able to leave and go back to her normal time. So she starts a life there. Then she does go back 3 years later, and now it's 1948. So 3 years have passed in both time frames. Now, this is where the interesting part comes in. When they figure that out, and she believes that her husband in the 200 years past has been killed in a battle, and it takes her 20 years to find out that he's actually still alive. And she goes back through the stones again 20 years later, and now they're both 20 years older. And it's very complicated. It's very cool. There's some really bloody battle scenes in it that are kind of interesting. She's a surgeon, by the way, so there's a lot of gore involved with her treating patients and amputating limbs and stuff like that. Of course, she has medical knowledge that they didn't have 200 years ago. It's just a really cool, well-written story that throws a different wrench in time travel when you start thinking about time travel.
What is it called?
Outlander. It's based on a series of books, and it's just, I think the first couple of episodes I was like, well, this is different, this is cool, it's interesting, but the more you watch it, oh my God, it's so well written, so well acted, and just the storyline keeps getting better and better. I think I'm in the middle of season 3 out of 4 seasons right now. So yeah, if you ever want to watch something pretty good, pull that up. So speaking of last thing, and then I promise we're taking a break. Speaking of time travel. So I have a lot of free time sometimes, and I don't sleep well because my brain never shuts off. And so one night I was laying awake in the middle of the night, and I actually solved time travel. Still working on world peace and hunger, but I did solve time travel.
You got like a flux capacitor or something?
Well, I haven't invented anything, but I know what needs to be invented. So if you're familiar, I'm sure you are, Leonardo da Vinci created the mathematics for escape velocity. He's the one who actually developed the math that NASA uses today to know how much thrust they need and how much force they need to escape gravity and get into orbit. Leonardo da Vinci did that. Leonardo da Vinci also invented the helicopter, if you can believe that. He has very detailed drawings. They didn't have the technology in his time to build it, but he developed the idea and all of the mathematics behind it. So I haven't done anything more than that. I know how to do it, but I don't have the technology to do it. So there's 2 facets involved here. One involves gravity. So what do you guys know about gravity and how that relates to the relativity of time? Anybody have any knowledge of that at all? Okay, so let me tell you where it came from, how we first figured this out, not me, but people in general. When we first put a man into orbit, they had chronometers, they had timepieces both on the spaceship that were matched with those on the ground. And what they found was that time in space moves ever so slightly slower than it does on Earth. So if you go up to the space station and you spend a year on the space station, when you come back, you will be slightly younger than you would have been if you had stayed on Earth. That's a pretty cool concept if you think about it. And the reason is that time moves more slowly. It is affected by gravity. It's part of the theory of relativity. So what we also know is that the most massively, most massive object gravitationally that we know of is a black hole. So what we know is that if you were to be able to sit on the event horizon of a black hole, you could sit there for 1,000 years and come back, and almost and to you, what had passed would have been 1,000 years. When you come back, it could have been millions of years. Again, we're going to go back to movies now. Oh shoot, it's only been out a couple of years ago. Matthew McConaughey. Yeah, I think it was called Gravity. I think that was the name of the movie. Did anybody see that one? So there's a scene in it where he's on a ship, and he and two other people have to go down to a planet to try to find a survivor. And they know this is going to happen because the gravitational forces on the planet are so much different than the orbiting in space. They're down on the planet for less than an hour, and when they come back up, 20 years have passed. So that's actually, it's not science fiction, it is fact. The difference in gravity will affect the travel or the passage of time, as will speed. If you were on a train and a train went all the way around the world and you could approach the speed of light, if that train went almost as fast as the speed of light and you were on that train for 10 years, when you got off of it, only 1 year would have passed off of the train. Very, very cool stuff to me anyway. All right, so now let me tell you how I solved it. Not to go back in time, but if I wanted to see, if I wanted to witness, let's say the Kennedy assassination, if I wanted to look at the grassy knoll and say, was there somebody there? Was there a second shooter? Was this conspiracy theory? Is there anything to it at all? And I wanted to be able to see it happen. There is a way to do it. What do you think would be necessary for me to see, what, 50, 60 years in the past?
Black magic.
Well, that might help, but there's actually a very scientific method, and we do it all the time. We do it all the time. We look into the past all the time. How do we do that? Like, we can literally see the past.
Oh, is it when
Looking at
they
the
like?
stars?
Well, Jaden, what'd you say?
Looking at the stars?
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the stars, the furthest galaxies away, you're looking at things that actually could maybe not even exist anymore. If it's more than a light year away, then what you're seeing happened actually a year ago. If you're seeing something, we have Hubble Space Telescope photos that see back literally 13 billion light years away. So what we're seeing is what existed 13 billion years ago. All right, so let's follow that concept now. So what is necessary if I want to see 60 years in the past? What do I need to do? Use this. Go ahead, Zach.
Into space and take a picture like so far away from the Earth.
Right. Now, how far away would I have to be to see 60 years in the past?
60 light years?
60 light years, exactly. So why would it not be possible? In fact, I know it would, and I know it would because Carl Sagan said anything that can be imagined can be realized. It should be possible to build or construct a device, maybe something that would orbit the Earth, and include a series of mirrors that would refract light in such a way to allow us to focus that at any given point of time in the past. Now, here's where it gets freaky, because I've imagined it. That means it's possible. That means that somebody someday is going to do it. Now let's really freak you out and go further. What that means is that what you do today in the privacy of your own homes is someday going to be on reality TV in the future. People will be able to see and hear. We can do it now. We can hear from space. We can hear conversations from space. Okay. And we do see slightly in the past because of the distance and all of that. But someday it is more than likely going to be possible. If somebody goes, hey, what really happened in 2021 when this COVID thing hit? Let's go back and take a look. Let's just focus the telescope and go back. And there is absolutely a way that that will be able to happen. Okay. So I had a little bit of help in figuring this out. Isaac Asimov, who was probably the best science fiction writer of all times, wrote a short story back in the 50s that dealt with that very thing. And they had built a device and the government controlled it and they wouldn't let anybody use it. And he was a historian and he wanted to go back and look at history. So he got upset and found a way to construct his own device. And he released the plans to the public so that everybody would be able to take advantage of this, without realizing that the past actually begins a microsecond ago. And what he just did was stripped the entire population of humanity from their privacy, because now anybody could build a device to watch you pretty much in real time. They could be a microsecond in the past and it's essentially real time. So they were like, they arrested him and they said, I hope you enjoy the future that you've just created. Just kind of a cool little twist on it. So I know we spent way too much time on that, but sometimes I just like to throw little things out to make your brain get on fire. And at some point before the end of the semester, I hope one of you come back and say, hey, wait a minute, I thought about this and I came up with this idea. I just hope I hope it doesn't keep you awake at night, but I do want you to think about it. All right. So it is 5:27. Let's.
Are we doing the best of show?
Oh, sorry. We skipped that. Yeah, let me go back to that. We should have 10. I've got 9. I missed somebody. Zach, and it's going to be your crystal.
Okay.
Sorry, I just made the decision for you.
No, that's okay.
All right, let me scan and see if I can guess. Wow, I think oh, and I don't know what happened to this one. That's not the way it looks. Oh, okay. It was just the preview. I see 1, 2, 3. I see 4 images that you guys are probably going to vote one of those 4. Let's just see how it starts. All right. So we're going to start with the sunset upper left. Hang on a second. 2, 3, 4. Oops, we just shifted. Hey, keep your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Gotcha. Let's go to Carly's frustration. Okay. Pistachio. Elephant envy. I forget the name of the movie with the little robot guy. Had the name 6, the word 6 in it. Raindrops. Sunset flare. Oh, okay, I have 2 of these in there. If I have 2 of these in there, then I'm still missing somebody. Does anybody see their image?
I think it might be mine.
Hannah.
'Cause I don't see mine.
Oh, you're right. And we talked
Yeah.
about it. We talked about it, but I did not put it in there.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get that one in. There we go. All right. Well, we hadn't gotten to it yet anyway, so we're good. So we did that. We did that. Next one was the water drops. Oh, no, we must have done that one because we were looking at the sun flare one. Okay. Then the other sunset landscape. This one we can skip because it got in there twice and it's squished. The low-key flower and Superman's Fortress of Solitude crystal. All right, so the overwhelming winner is the sunset, the first shot. Trying to mark it. There we go. Got it. I think I'm only going to give one other one. I do like some of these really well, but some of the ones that I like do have some technical problems here and there. I'm going to go with the pistachio. We're going to throw a point at the pistachio as well. So hang on, let me look through here. So it's Caleb. Oh, did I miss the pistachio? There it is. Jaden and Caleb get our 2 points today. Huh. Interesting. Caleb just continues to crush in this arena. Like, I don't think you've missed one in the last I didn't realize which, I wasn't thinking about who it was, and I go over and look, and you've got like 7 points there. So you're definitely killing it. If it wasn't for some minor technical things, I love the elephant shot. And Sierra, you were really close with this just because I think it's such a simple image, but it's so well done. And I tend to reward stuff like that more often than not, but tried to pull back a little bit today and just go with the 2. So those are our winners for today. Let's come back at 5:45. We have our topic for next week is humor. So that might be kind of fun. You guys have been pretty good at that. You've been getting better all semester. So we're going to give you some guidelines and talk about that when we come back in 15 at 5:45, 5:46, something like that. All right, guys, we'll see you in a bit. So Carly, I hadn't seen your chat message until just now. Sounds like some kind of Doctor Who wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff. Yep, pretty much. And a disclaimer, by the way, when I told you guys about Outlander, I have to give you a little disclaimer. It's kind of dirty. Like it's really dirty. Like you know, when they have the thing at the beginning that says, you know, violence, nudity, whatever. Like this is the longest list I've ever seen for a TV show. Like it's takes up the whole top of the screen. There's that much stuff that they have to warn you about. So just be forewarned when you go in. Oh, and Caleb, are you there? Where's Caleb? Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry. I got your email with your other images, and yeah, so this one with the signs up near Steubenville, that original was like you could have submitted that just as it was. There was good detail in the sky. It still was a high key image. The other one, I like the way you processed it, you know, that darkness, but there is detail in the original. Now you've cropped it, so it might be a little more difficult to overlay it and bring some detail out, but you can definitely do that. Like there's, I don't think I'd want to see, in fact, let me go in and pull that up. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to see all of it. Like as I look at this, I think I'd still keep it, you know, the center areas where the dam and the trees. I might keep it a little bit below that yet, but I would definitely bring some of that in addition to the rest of it. I love what you've done with the rest of it. I wouldn't mess with that at all. But I just wanted to mention that to you. All right.
I have a question
Sure.
pertaining to the histogram. So when we classify a picture being low key or high key, are we talking about the halves? Like all the things are on one half of the midpoint versus the other?
Not all of them, but the majority
Yeah,
of them. So
majority.
like, yeah. So like if I pulled, I'm sorry, pulled an image up that went to Camera Raw, but if once this opens in Photoshop and we look at the histogram, if it opens in Photoshop.
Because I noticed in some of the when we were going over this today that some of them had some values over on the other side, but
yeah,
they were
and
still
they
classified.
definitely can. So this one, you know, you can see how it's way shifted to the right, but there are pixels all the way down to the deepest shadow. And I think the other one, you'll even see more of that. Yeah. So shifted to the right. It's, you know, when we talk about high key, we just want, that means that the majority of the pixels are to the right of the midpoint. And low key, the majority of them are to the left. Now, the more that area gets towards the extreme right and the extreme left, the more pronounced the effect is going to be. But you can definitely have dark pixels in a high key image and, you know, light pixels in a low key image. So we're just talking about the majority of them. That's really all.
Okay.
That explain it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Oh, and one other clarification. I said earlier that time passes differently at the event horizon of a black hole. That's a little confusing. It passes differently in relationship to how it passes outside of that. So for example, if you're there, time will appear to pass at the same rate, but relative to people who are not subject to that kind of gravity, it will flow differently. If that makes it's a fine line, but it's a big distinction. So I just wanted to clarify that. I thought of that. All right. So we're going to look at we're going to look at three things that I literally have not spent a lot of time on. In fact, let me open them in Reader so that we can see them a little more clearly. There we go. So what we're looking at are still life images, pets, and food. And I'll tie this in once we get a little further down the line. So when we're talking about still life images, and I guess I'm going to have to, there we go. We're basically talking about images that you set up and create rather than a found. I mean, I guess it could be something you find, but typically we're talking about something that you put into place, small items. You know, in this case, we're looking at eggs and flowers and keys and other things like that that have been, you know, meticulously placed together to create some type of arrangement that may not, it probably did not exist, you know, on its own. It could have. You could have walked around and found that, you know, dozen of eggs sitting on a table like that and thought, wow, this is a great still life, and taken the picture. But more often than not, these are things that are created, items that you will take and place together. That's typically what we think of when we talk about a still life image. They can be larger scale, but for the most part, they're not. They tend to be a little bit, you know, undersized. So with the eggs and the flowers on the lower right, even to some extent, the other two images, but lighting plays a big key there. You know, eggs having the shape that they do, the way to see that shape is to make sure that they're not lit flatly from the camera, but lit more from the side. This is relatively soft lighting. It's not creating harsh shadows, but it's enough of a direction to let us really see the shape of those eggs. So the point I'm trying to make here is that as we go through this and I show you what we're going to get into for your assignment next week, I want you to always keep in mind that even though we may be talking about one or two things specifically, don't neglect the other ones. Don't neglect the technical stuff about exposure, about lighting, about composition, and all of that. These images, those two in particular that we just talked about, would not be as good as they are if it wasn't for the lighting. All right, so now let's go to food. And you might wonder, what does food have to do with still life? These three PDF files have been uploaded, by the way, to the documents folder, documents folder in the resources area on Sakai. So if you want to take a closer look at them. Food, so three of these images are shot from overhead. That's kind of typical with a lot of food shots. The other two are a little more of a straight on angle. But the one thing about food, again, is lighting. It's not going to be lit from the camera position. If you've ever been in a restaurant and looked at a menu where the pictures just were not appetizing at all and didn't make you want to buy them, they were probably lit from the camera position. When they're not, when they're lit from, you know, if you're shooting down low and it's lit from overhead or lit from behind, and it lets light kind of create highlights across the different textures, that's what makes a photograph interesting and appealing, especially if it's food. Compositionally, again, if you look at these, there's a lot of things done intentionally. This is one of the few where we have a centered subject, but we do have these supporting characters around the outer side. And the fact that, you know, the plate mirrors the center yolk of the egg, that's probably the reason for the centered composition. The waffles are creating a bit of an arc, a bit of a curve down, which kind of mirrors the curve of this cup. It fills in around it. You notice that the sticks in whatever these little pastry things are not all going in the same direction. They're kind of, you know, intentionally placed exactly where they are to create different angles. Another shot from overhead is D, but again, look at the items that are placed around it. So there's a lot of crossover. Food and still life can be the same. Like these could be considered still lifes, you know, as much as they are food photographs. because of the placement and the meticulous placement, and not just the placement, but look, this is something that we've been talking about movies all day. This is something you see in movies all day. Look at this shot number D. What is it that really makes that food stand out, do you think? If there was just one element, what would you say it is that makes that stand out more than anything else? And to get the answer, look at everything else in the image.
The contrast of the food against the table.
Yeah, the contrast, I would say the color or contrast, either one. If you look, everything else was intentionally picked because it's fairly monotone, and it kind of recedes into the background. You see it, they're supporting actors, so to speak, but the color of the food on that plate, there's nothing like that in the image except for those few small pieces off to the right. So they really, really stand out. If this had been shot on a yellow background, I don't think that would look nearly as appealing, but the way it's done, it's really, really cool, really well done. The color harmony in that image, the color harmony in this image, C, and even the monotone harmony in B, all plays a part. They all work together. And finally, we're going to look at pets, which I know is something near and dear to some of your hearts. So the first image on the left is kind of fun, right? Because we don't even see the faces of either person. But the cool thing is that they are fairly similar in size. So they kind of look like two people sitting there. The other thing is, again, notice the monochromatic color, how everything is on the warm side. The dog actually matches the foreground really well. So these things are not accidental. It's the reason that photograph, it's one of the reasons that photograph is as striking as it is. The other one is storytelling. What are they looking at? Why is the dog as interested as the person is? I mean, there's all sorts of things, maybe there's a duck swimming out there. You don't know, you have to make it up, but it does kind of force you to do that. The cat, and I think we've talked, the first cat anyway, we've talked about this a few times, zooming in and filling the frame with something can sometimes be a really effective tool, especially with felines, because their whiskers can kind of touch the edges of the frame and create, some diagonal lines on their own. But the eyes are so important, and that's when they become very prominent, is when you come in really tight. The dog is just cute as heck. I know that the original image, these have been cropped down to fit the format, this square format. I know that this original image had a little more in it, like they didn't crop it right at the tips of this dog's paws. So I'm not going to throw stones at him for that. But again, he's all white. The background is all blue. Direct sunlight, but soft enough, probably filtered through a little bit of cloud. It creates texture in the fur, but not overly harsh shadows. The last one, I think, to me, I think the most interesting part about that, so the cat is in contrast with the chair, but it kind of matches a little bit more the wood in the paneling in the background. So it's almost kind of a repeating pattern. So if we take those three things, we've got food, pets, and still life. Let me close these up, and we'll look at a little more detail. But our assignment, your assignment for next week, is going to be to shoot one of those, food, pets, or still life, but to do it with humor. And now pets are a little easier to do kind of in a funny way. Still life and food can be a little more difficult, but I'm going to show you some examples. And again, keep in mind that these things do tend to cross over. They're not all, and so in fact, I've kept them all in the same folder because they do cross over so much. So here's a funny, dogs are probably the easiest thing to photograph humorously. This person's owner clearly has trained this dog to not eat these bones until it's told to. And I've seen this a lot where, you know, you put a bone on a dog's nose and you tell it to sit there, and it will sit. If it's trained well, it will sit there with as much as it wants that bone. It will not move until you tell it, okay, go for it. And this guy's gone a lot further than that because he's got bones stuck in its mouth and everything else. This dog, if you could read the dog's mind, my guess is the dog would be looking at the owner saying, someday I will kill you. That's what I would be thinking if I were being forced to do that. So anyway, that's a little humorous, a little bit of a still life with this duck. Sort of looks like it's about to be sucked down the drain. Again, look at the composition here. We've got balance between the duck and the drain. We've got rule of thirds. We've got a couple things going on. Again, color contrast with the duck in that background. It's the brightest thing, the most colorful thing. This one's kind of fun. Somebody's created snakes out of these ties. They even put eyes on a couple of them to further that, but even the ones that are way off are sort of snaked into that position. So it doesn't have to be overly elaborate. You know, something as simple as a drawer full of ties can be, you know, they probably just put a piece of wire or something through those ties to make them do that. So it doesn't have to be overly elaborate for this to work. Sometimes it is more elaborate. And this to me looks like an actual, it does not look like a photoshopped image. It looks like an actual photograph where they've taken peanuts and stuck, you know, wires in them for arms and legs. It's created this little wire ladder. But again, the lighting is really cool. Look how it's definitely coming from, well, from both sides actually, because the peanuts are lit from the left and from the right. So, and then the highlight being created by the glass is interesting. Again, monochromatic background, but a foreground that sort of matches the tonality of the peanuts. So again, I don't want you to forget about all of those things when you go to create your images. A little bit of a still life, just using some stuffed animals and a little bit of origami. Well, it's not really I guess maybe it is. I don't know. Whatever you would call that. But, you know, these animals have just been, you know, placed in a position and a little story created around them. This is food and still life. And, you know, somebody just saw, now the splashes obviously are a little more complex, but even without the splashes, we still have a cool little tic-tac-toe effect created here. Just all it involves is a little bit of creativity. Now, this one I think is funny. If you want to create an outfit for your pet, and you see these things done all the time, but they're still effective. I mean, they're still funny to look at. So that one's kind of cute. I love that. You want to talk about food and humor? There's these two eggs seeing their friend fried on a sidewalk. It really wouldn't take much to do something like this, but it's really cool, really effective. Again, notice the color harmony in the image. The color of the eggs are on the warm scale. The balance created, the triangular shape created between the three eggs. Just a lot of little things that were done pretty well here. This is just a balloon nailed, you know, down to the background on a string, a helium balloon probably, and then a wig and some false eyelashes put on it. I mean, just very creative, but very simple. This can be done pretty easily.
That bothers me.
That one bothers you?
Yeah, that was scary.
I don't know why. It just reminds me of Liza Minnelli.
Yeah, oh my God, it does. It does. Not just the eyelashes, but the hairstyle as well. Yeah, that's pretty funny. So Max, you should probably create one that's maybe a little more whimsical and not as scary, just so you don't have nightmares.
Yeah, will do.
There's another simple image. If your dog will let you do this to them, I think mine would eat them. But a lot of dogs will actually wear glasses. Sometimes there's a little bit of help in Photoshop. I think the eyes and the mouth are probably augmented with a little liquify in Photoshop. But it's, you know, it is a good, very clean, simple image. This one I think is hilarious. could have been done a lot of ways. It could have actually been done the way you're looking at it here too. The dog could have just been laying on its back and they took this little barbell and stuck it on top. I think it's funny. Food and still life combined again, just to create a little bit of humor. Same thing here. We've got pirates more than anything. Yeah, I see one that has sort of a wooden leg. One has an eye patch, but they've just been decorated to look a little funny. And again, color harmony again in this image as well. This one's a little more grotesque, but it's still kind of funny. And it's so simple, you know. Now this one does not have a great lighting. In fact, the lighting's pretty crappy, but it still has a lot of impact when you look at it, you know, to dress these two hot dogs up and do that. I love, the best part to me are the X's on the eyes for the hot dog that's had its head cut off. It reminds me of the Christmas Story. You can create a meme as well. Every time the waiter checks on my table and you've got this squirrel with his mouth full of nuts. So if you want to add text or add words or something to further that process out, you're certainly welcome to do that. Who knows? Maybe it'll go viral. Let's get the next one here. Yeah, just humor. These two images, I can't imagine being a dog and seeing stuff being on the grill like that. That has to be torture. I've been really lucky so far. I mean, my dog's only 5 months old, but when I go to sit down in the kitchen and eat, or even at the dining room table, he leaves me alone. He does not beg for food. The only thing he does beg for is if I bring it into the living room and sit down on the couch, he thinks he should have it. And he is very, very interested in ice cream. That's all. I don't know why, but he is really into ice cream. And this dog on the right here is just hilarious. Again, really simple idea, really cute, but really easy to do. If you just want to draw some faces on some eggs and figure out ways to make them interact, this one's a pretty fun one. A little more complicated, but not that complicated. You could, you know, I think the arms of these things were probably created in Photoshop, but you could probably do almost the same thing without the arms. Just a little food still life. I like the strawberry swinging in the background. I think that's on the vine. I think that's hilarious. This one's cute as anything. I mean, it took me a second to even realize what I was looking at, but the dog in the center is real and the other ones look just like it. I think that's hilarious. If I can get my dog to do this, I'm going on the Tonight Show. Or I will quit all my jobs and I will teach your dog to do this for money, because I think that would be the ultimate thing for any dog owner. Very simplistic composition, probably a wide angle lens very close to the dog. Color harmony again, because the background really matches that dog's nose more than anything. But just a very unique and unusual composition. I love that. And then finally, we've got, you know, just these, and you can do this with an apple physically. You could do it digitally, but it's just kind of sewn together with the thread in the background. So it's kind of fun. So there are 23 examples of humor using either pets, food, or still life. And so for next week, you need to create at least one. More is better, but I'll say this: if you have a great idea and you spend a fair amount of time creating that one idea and you really nail it, you really think you've got it, that is every bit as good, if not better, than 3 images that are just sort of okay. Does that make sense? Like if you're not sure if you're really getting it, then throw a few images at me. But if you really think, my God, this is it, this is the end all be all, then I'll be happy with 1. So I'm not putting a number on what you have to create. You can do 1, you can do more, but just kind of use these as guidelines and examples, but come up with your own idea if you can. All right, let me stop the share here. Get back to this, and 11. Whoops, hang on. Yep. Okay. I just want to make sure I had everybody accounted for, and I do. All right. So any questions at all about next week's assignment? I just want to get away from the technical stuff, even though I'm going to still look at the technical stuff, and we'll talk about anything that you might have done better along those lines, exposure, and all of that, white balance. But I just kind of wanted to give you guys something to sink your teeth into and be a little more fun than just say, well, let's do something that's shot at f8. And we get tired of that kind of stuff. And not all of you have the same capabilities to be able to create images using the technical ends. So we wanted to do something like this. Next week, the assignment that'll last, go over a 2-week period, will be similar to that. In fact, I think for the remaining assignments, they're going to be way less technical and a little more creative. All right, we good, guys? Everybody sound like you're hanging in there? All right, so the sun's still out. It's 10 after 6. If you can figure out a way, because it's going to get crappy tomorrow, if you can figure out a way from what I told you to go back in time and get back to today when the weather's good, let me know how you did that. And I'll patent the idea. You can patent the technical side, and we'll both get rich. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Let me know if you have any questions in the meantime. Bye.